going live again this week to talk about what to look for when you're buying a guitar. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because this is something that comes up again and again and again and again when I'm talking to particularly parents. It can be really, really confusing, especially if you've got no kind of musical background yourself. You know, often when you're looking, you just get bombarded with all different types of guitars, lots of different prices, lots of different sizes, and you're just, you know, it's that kind of choice thing. You're just bombarded with so much choice. It's really, really hard to make a decision. So hopefully some of the advice I'm going to give you today will kind of help you cut through all of that noise a little bit. You know, I'm going to give you some practical tips as well. Okay. The first thing that I want to mention really is that buying a guitar is quite a personal thing. There's no one size fits all, right? So what might be right for you or your child or your friend's child is not necessarily right for the next person, right? Some people are really clear that they want to learn electric guitar. Some people are really clear that they want to learn acoustic guitar. Some people have no idea, you know, again, particularly if they're buying for a child. So what I'm going to try and give today are a few parameters just to kind of help you know where to start when you're looking. So first thing I want to talk about really is budget. Often I think people are a little concerned, especially if they're buying for a child. They don't know whether the child is going to stick with guitar. We obviously try and encourage our students, especially children, to stick with guitar for at least 6 months, if not a year. We found that if you can get beyond the initial 6 months, which are generally the hardest, you're much more likely then to stick around and guitar playing to become something that becomes a much longer term thing for you. But, you know, understandably, as a parent, you don't want to be spending loads of money on something that your child may eventually end up losing interest in. So I'll talk about budget in a second. I'll also talk about what type of guitar to look for. Again, it's a personal thing, so I'll give some suggestions, but it's something for you guys to really discuss and talk about among yourselves. And then what size? Obviously, you know, for younger kids, you need to get a smaller size than for full-grown adults, and there are various different sizes and types in between, so I'll talk about those as well. And then something really, really, really important that's come up over the last few weeks, really since the beginning of the year. I've been running a lot of kind of intro lessons with people, and I noticed that there were a few parents who had bought right-handed guitars for their left-handed kids without realizing that actually, if you're going to be playing guitar left-handed, you need to actually buy a guitar that is strung the correct way, and I'll kind of show you what I mean by that in a minute. So I'm going to talk about that first, and then I'm going to go on to those other things that I just talked about. So again, with left-handed guitar players, right? It's a personal thing, and it all depends on kind of how left-handed you or your child is or are. So for example, one of our teachers, Mike, I know Mike is left-handed in every other respect. He writes left-handed, you know, he does everything else left-handed, but he's learned to play guitar right-handed and he's quite happy doing that. Another one of our teachers, Zach, is left-handed and plays guitar left-handed. So what I normally recommend for people to do if they're not sure, especially if it's a younger child, is just to and obviously it's much easier to do this if you can actually go into a music shop, which I appreciate you can't do at the moment, but you know, maybe see if you can borrow one off someone that you know, and just ask them to hold it. So I'm going to demonstrate here on one of my guitars. All right. So ask them to hold the guitar kind of both ways around and and work out which one is going to feel the most comfortable to them. Now, bear in mind, they've never picked up a guitar before, it's probably going to feel uncomfortable either way. But I know from experience that some kids have picked up a guitar and they've instantly said, yeah, it feels better this way. They can't kind of tell why, they can't put a finger on it, but they say, yeah, it feels better this way. So I'm right-handed. This is my right-handed guitar, and I'm holding it with my right arm here over the kind of body of the guitar, with my hand over the sound hole here, and my left hand is the hand that takes care of pressing down the frets on the neck here. Okay, now if I was to turn this around, right, which for me feels very uncomfortable, right, you'd see that all of the strings change, right? So these thicker strings, which are supposed to be at the top of the guitar as you're looking down on it, become at the bottom of the guitar. So the whole thing becomes upside down, right? So if I wanted to play this guitar left-handed, or any guitar left-handed, I would need to make sure that the strings were kind of strung around the other way. So that's why we have different guitars for left-handed and right-handed players. So again, particularly if this is your first guitar, if your child is left-handed, or you think they might be, this is something to consider, right? Which way around are they going to feel comfortable doing? That feels really uncomfortable for me. Which way around are they going to feel? Are they going to feel comfortable, you know, having their strumming or picking arm, right? And then their fretting hand here, okay? So that is something that I really wanted to point out before we go any further, because it's something I've seen a lot of people making mistakes with recently. All right, so let's talk about budget. I've just done a little bit of a search on a few kind of online music shops that I go to, and I found the sweet spot. Again, this depends on size, type, whether you're going to get some kind of starter pack, which I'm going to cover all of this in a second. But you're kind of looking at somewhere between 50 and 150 pounds. Okay, so it is going to be a bit of an investment for sure, and you certainly can get cheaper than that. I'm going to explain why that's not always the best idea in a second, but you can generally get you know, kind of smaller starter kids guitars for around about the 50-60 pound mark if you buy them online, and if you go up to a starter pack, they can be normally, you know, between about 100 and 150 pound, and I'll explain the differences between those in a minute. So you don't need to spend a fortune, and remember, think of it as an investment. If this is something that your child is really keen to do, and you're really kind of keen for them to, you know, go the full distance with it and make it something that they're going to do, you know, not only for a few years, but potentially for the rest of their lives, you know, it will be a really good investment. You can go, you know, if you go to somewhere like Amazon or Argos or eBay, you can find cheaper guitars for 20 or 30 quid. I would really recommend staying away from those types of guitars. Again, just with experience here, I've seen people come into the studio with a brand new guitar that's actually broken, right? They're not always broken, but you know, often they are. You know, they ship these guitars over from, you know, places in Southeast Asia. Very often they're not checked, or nothing is done with them in between leaving the factory and then getting to you. So often these guitars are incredibly out of tune, very hard to put into tune, even for seasoned players. You know, I mean, I've spent sometimes 15-20 minutes of a lesson just trying to get someone's seriously out of tune guitar in tune. And yeah, you know, sometimes they do arrive with, you know, the tuning pegs broken, or, you know, something's kind of happened in transit. So they can be a bit of a false economy, and on a few occasions, you know, there's a parent that's tried to save money buying a cheap guitar, and they've actually then just had to send that guitar back and buy a more expensive one anyway, or they've had to take it to be fixed, and the cost of fixing it is more expensive than the actual guitar was in the first place, right? So Again, you don't need to spend a fortune, but it is worth spending a little bit more, you know, because this is going to be hopefully an investment in something that you or your child is going to get a lot of use out of. All right, so let's talk about the different types of guitars then, because again, you know, if you go online, you see all different types of guitars, and it's very, very easy to get overwhelmed. So the first type of guitar that I'm going to show here, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully that works. Yeah. This is your kind of standard classical, or sometimes called a flamenco guitar. This is the first kind of guitar that I started learning on when I was a child at primary school, a very, very long time ago. These are the types of guitars that if schools run guitar programs, they get a job lot of these in. You know, you can get them pretty cheap if you buy them in bulk. So these are generally the sorts of guitars that younger kids start on, mainly because they're so, you know, they're relatively cheap and easy to find, but also because the neck is a little bit wider and the strings are a little bit softer. So if kids are trying to press their fingers down on the frets, it doesn't hurt, or, you know, it won't hurt as much as it will if they're using a different type of guitar. So for the vast majority of parents, unless your child has specifically asked otherwise, this is probably going to be the first kind of guitar that you get. It's going to look something like this. Okay, so that's your classical guitar. Next one is what we call an acoustic guitar. Now, these look very similar. All right, this looks very, very similar to a classical guitar. It's still got the same, you know, the sound hole in the middle. What's important to understand about these guitars is they have a little bit of a longer neck, so you've got a few more frets to play with. The neck is a bit thinner, and the strings this time are generally steel strings. So these are a little bit harsher again when you press your fingers down. But for people who kind of, you know, I'm talking about, I guess, older, you know, maybe teenagers, certainly adult students who particularly want to play acoustic type music, these are normally a good bet. Okay, and again, even within this acoustic guitars, you can get various different shapes, sizes, all of that stuff as well, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So important to kind of get that distinction there, the difference between classical guitars and acoustic guitars. They do look very similar, but they, you know, there are some very key differences there. And then finally, of course, we have our electric guitar. Probably seen something that looks like that. That is usually when people get their first electric guitar, it looks something like this. When you're a beginner, right, particularly with our method, doesn't matter whether you're learning on any of these types of guitar, classical, acoustic, electric, the skills are the same, right? We teach the same skills, so you can learn on any of these guitars. The only difference I would say is if you're looking specifically for classical guitar lessons, as in the type of music that you want to play is traditional classical guitar music, then, you know, you're going to be better off buying a nylon string classical guitar for that. But for our method, what we do, all of our skills, they can be done on any of these types of guitars. So a common question I get from people is, can I start learning on an electric guitar, or do I need to learn on acoustic or classical first? No, if you want to start learning on an electric guitar, and that's what's going to get you excited about picking up the guitar and practicing and progressing, then get an electric guitar. Okay, you know, you can always switch to acoustic guitar later. In fact, again, in my own experience, I started off playing on a classical guitar when I was at primary school. I got my first electric guitar when I was, I think, 10 or 11. And then I played that all throughout my teens. And then I switched to acoustic guitar when I was in my early 20s. So, you know, you can start on one and then mix and match around the others. Okay, so that's the different types of guitars. Next, we want to talk about size. Okay, again, I've seen parents, but you know, they've got an old guitar that maybe granddad's given them. You know, it's a full size, big acoustic guitar, and they've given it to a 6-year-old kid, and the guitar is like bigger than the kid. Okay, and the kid's sitting there going like that, trying to play it, and obviously feeling very frustrated because they can't. So there are generally 3 different types of sizes that you can get for guitar. The first is what we call a half-size guitar, and those are normally best for younger kids, you know, kids between about the age of 4 and 7 or 8, something like that, because the body is a little smaller, the neck is a little bit shorter, so you know they're not having to kind of stretch or, you know, contort their body into uncomfortable positions to play it. So half-size guitar if you're buying for a younger child. If you're buying for kind of junior school age, you know, 7, 8 up to about 11 or 12, I would recommend getting a 3/4 size guitar, so the next size up, but not full size. Again, kids are a little bit bigger at that age, but they're not necessarily ready for a full size guitar. And then anybody over about 12, 13, you know, through to adults, you're going to be fine getting a full size guitar. But again, particularly with acoustic guitars, there are some kind of variations that you need to be thinking about there. So, for example, this is one of my favorite guitars, and this is actually a 3/4 size guitar, right? I bought this back in 2005 when I first started teaching. And when I first started teaching, I was living in London and I was getting public transport round to students' houses. So I was on buses, tubes, trams. You know, at the time, I didn't really want to lug around either my heavy electric guitar or my quite expensive, really lovely classical guitar, which were my kind of other 2 options at the time. So I bought this one specifically because it's very light, and it's slightly smaller. So this is actually what we call a travel guitar, which is generally the same size as a 3/4 size guitar. And these are absolutely fine for adults to use. I particularly find that they're good for you know, younger teenagers, particularly girls, and women as well. If you've got a smaller frame, some of the kind of bigger, bulkier acoustic guitars, again, even if you're an adult, can feel a little bit intimidating for you. So adults can still play on 3/4 size guitars. And you know, if you want to go down that route, I recommend looking at travel guitar. This is a Crafter. Crafter are really, really good particularly for this type of guitar. Okay. And then one other thing I want to talk about as well is what we call a starter pack. And starter packs are kind of, you know, what you would imagine them to be. They've got everything generally that you or your child is going to need. I often recommend getting a starter pack because very often you're going to need to buy some of this stuff anyway. You know, we always recommend that our students have a tuner, a metronome, you know, sometimes a capo as you start to get a little bit better, a spare set of strings, some picks or plectrums, a guitar strap. If it's an electric guitar, you might need a little amp and a cable to plug it in. So if you get a starter pack, a case, if you get a starter pack, you're more likely to get all of this in a bundle, which is going to be cheaper in the long run than having to buy it all separately. So you can get starter packs for acoustic guitars. I think even for classical guitars, you can certainly get them for electric guitars as well. So, you know, that's something to think about. You know, if you Google guitar starter pack or guitar starter kit, you'll get a few different ones come up. So where to buy, especially now, right? Because my normal advice, you know, back in the olden days, I would always say to them, look, go to a music shop. Don't buy off Amazon. Don't even buy online. Go to a music shop. Take your child with you if you can. You know, talk to the people there. See what their recommendations are. Get your child to kind of sit with a few and try some out. And of course, this helps to figure out the left hand, right hand thing as well. And, you know, if you buy from a music shop, you're much more likely to get it tuned up before you leave. You're much more likely to make sure that the guitar is in good condition. It's not broken. There's nothing that needs to be fixed or set up. And, you know, we will get back to that eventually. But in the meantime, I've got a few online sites that I want to recommend. So what I would say is, if you know of a local music shop near you, right, the chances are they're going to have some kind of online operation running now, right? They're going to have to, because they still need to be open. They still need to be making money. People are still wanting to buy instruments. So, you know, look them up online. Very often there's a phone number, so if you need any advice, you can give them a call. You know, these people are generally very knowledgeable. If you tell them, you know, my child is 7, and you know, this is what my budget is. You know, we're a beginner. You know, they'll be able to help you out. So if you do have a local music shop, I would suggest starting there and seeing if they're online, because that way, then if there does end up being a problem with the instrument, they're local, so you can, you know, you can still take it in to be fixed or dropped off, you know, if you need to. A lot of guitar shops have guitar workshops attached to them or within them, so that you know, if there is anything wrong or they need to set anything up, they'll be able to do that quickly for you. Okay, so that's my first recommendation. Next thing, I found a few online sites. So one is called Anderton's, which I find very difficult to say, Anderton's, which is based in Guildford, but they are a national online shop. And what I know about Anderton's is that if you call them after you've ordered a guitar, or when you're on the cusp of ordering a guitar, they will double check the guitar for you before it goes out, right? You have to request that, but you know, they will make sure that you know, it hasn't gone ridiculously out of tune. They will make sure there's nothing wrong with it, right? They don't charge you for this. You just need to be proactive and give them a call and ask them to do it. Okay, so they're a really good bet to go with. Another online site that I use a lot is Gear for Music. They've got very good reviews. Again, they're a specialist music shop. You can find pretty much whatever you want on there. In general, if you're buying stuff from these places, you know that it's going to be a higher quality than just getting something off Amazon or from, you know, Argos or somewhere that's not a specialized music retailer. Okay. And then the third one, again, that I recommend is Guitar, which, as you would imagine, is all about guitars, although I think they do sell stuff to do with other instruments as well. They've got a big store over in Epsom, and I think they've got a few more over the country as well. But again, you know, they'll send guitars out nationwide. So finally, recommendations. Okay, so we normally recommend, so if we start with the younger kids, the sort of 4 to 6, 7 sort of age group, right? We normally recommend for that age group half-size classical guitars, even though we don't teach traditional classical guitar, fingerstyle guitar. You know, there are certain elements of classical learning that we do provide in our program, but you know, you can easily go through our program, especially if your child is starting at that age, learning on a half-size classical guitar. Okay, that's normally the the best size and the best type of instrument for kids of that age, because it is a little bit more of a challenge for kids at that age. You know, they haven't got the finger strength yet. They haven't developed some of the dexterity that they need to do, you know, some of the kind of trickier stuff. So we want to try and make it as easy for them as possible, you know, to pick it up within those constraints. And for kids aged 7 to 11, similar, right? But this time we would recommend a 3/4 size classical guitar. Okay. Now, a good make that we've used in the past and that we've recommended in the past is a make called Valencia. So I think these were retailing for about 60, 70 quid, something like that. But they're really good quality instruments. They're the ones that we used to have in our studio and the one that we used to hand out to people when we were doing like open days and stuff like that, just so people could have a go. So, you know, by no means that is not the only make to buy, but that's certainly one that we know that's good and one that we would recommend. Now, a little aside, because some kids of this age group are really set on learning electric guitar, and often parents are like, oh, you know, they think the whole idea of their kid learning electric guitar is a little bit scary. They think it's going to be expensive. You know, they think it's going to be noisy. And, you know, what I would say, yes, you know, those concerns are legitimate. But as I mentioned earlier, you can get, you know, you don't need to spend more than about 100, 150 quid on an electric guitar starter pack, which includes everything you're going to need. So if your child has specifically asked for an electric guitar, and that's what's going to keep them engaged and that's what's going to keep them motivated to learn, get them an electric guitar. Seriously. Again, I know from experience, I was desperate to learn on an electric guitar when I was a kid. I was so excited when I got my first one. And, you know, I learned some basic stuff on the classical guitar, but it just wasn't doing it for me, really. You know, I didn't feel like I could play the stuff that I wanted to play on that kind of guitar. So you can get, again, 3/4 size electric guitar starter packs for kids of that age. Again, make sure you're buying the right size guitar, but everything else is included. You get the amp, the cable, the strap, the picks, the tuner, sometimes a metronome, sometimes you get some kind of an instruction book as well. So, you know, they lump all of this stuff in together and it's a really, really good bargain. So for kids of 7 to 11, either a 3/4 size classical guitar, or if they've specifically asked for electric guitar, get them an electric guitar starter pack, again, 3/4 size. Okay. And then finally on to teens, adults, well, anyone over the age of about 12, really, 12 or 13. You got two choices, I guess. Again, well, three if you include the classical guitar, but you know, if you're an adult or a teen learning, only buy a classical guitar if you specifically want to play traditional classical guitar music, okay? Because otherwise, if you want to play songs and stuff like that, you're going to be better off buying either a full-size acoustic guitar or a full-size electric guitar, again, as part of a starter pack, okay? So what I want you to think about is think about the kind of music that you're into and the kind of music you'd like to be able to play. Again, you know, if you're into, you know, rock and metal, you don't have to think, well, I've got to start on classical or acoustic guitar first and then move to electric. No, start on electric. Again, if that's what's going to, you know, these electric guitars are very, very cool. If that's what's going to kind of keep you engaged and keep you motivated, start on electric, right? You can always switch later on. If you're into, you know, kind of singer-songwriter type stuff, and you know you want to strum a few chords and kind of sing along, maybe write some songs, then you know an acoustic guitar might be better for you. But again, there's no, I'm not going to say get this, get that, because it's a very personal thing for you. But what I would say, if you're buying an acoustic guitar, you might want to consider getting something a little bit smaller. You know, maybe a 3/4 size if you or your child is a little bit smaller, or, you know, just one with a kind of slightly smaller body, okay? And with an electric guitar, definitely get a starter pack, and make sure it's a full size one, because, you know, these guitars, you know, I've had that one for 15 years. I've had this one, oh, my lovely classical guitar, the one that I didn't want to lug around on the tube because it was very expensive at the time. I've had this now for 20 years. So, you know, these aren't just going to be with you for a few months, right? This is something that we want to help you turn into something that becomes a big part of your life. And I know that we've already done that for a lot of our students. You know, we want to do that for you too. So have a little bit of faith, spend a little bit more money on making sure you're getting the right thing, and invest the time, because it's really, really, really going to be worth it. Once you get beyond that first 6 months to a year and you start being able to actually play some recognizable tunes, you know, then it just starts snowballing after that, and you want to have a decent instrument and you want to have the right instrument to do it on. I will see you soon. Cheers.